The Mississippi sun burned at 92 degrees F, a relentless haze that turned the air thick and sticky along Highway 61. 3 miles south of Clarksdale, where cotton fields stretched like a patchwork quilt under the July 2025 sky, a 1987 Chevy pickup truck sat lifeless on the gravel shoulder. Its hood was propped open, exposing a rusted engine that had logged 220,000 miles and now refused to turn over. Dust swirled around the truck's chipped red paint, kicked up by a faint breeze that carried the distant wail of a harmonica from the Shack Up Inn, a neon-lit juke joint nestled among tin-roofed shacks. The blues pulsed faintly, a heartbeat in the humid dusk, as if the land itself was singing its story of struggle and soul. Next to the truck stood a man who didn't belong. Not here, not like this. Keanu Reeves, 175 pounds of lean frame, wore a faded denim jacket caked with dust and scuffed boots that hadn't seen polish in months. His beard was thick, his hair tangled and long, falling past his ears in greasy strands. Grease smudged his hands from a futile attempt to fix the engine, and sweat stung his eyes, blurring the horizon. To anyone passing by, he was just a drifter, another wanderer on a road that chewed up dreamers and spat them out. But Keanu was no drifter. He was here by choice, stripped of fame, wealth, and recognition, chasing a truth most would never dare to touch. For 2 months, Keanu had vanished into the skin of someone else, shedding the polished veneer of Hollywood for a role no studio would fund. His film, Blues of the Unseen, was more than art. It was a mission to expose how appearance shapes justice, how the world decides who matters and who doesn't. The idea had taken root years ago, born from a wound that never healed. In 1964, his mentor, James Carter, a civil rights activist with a voice like thunder and a heart too big for the world, had been arrested in Mississippi, dragged from a Clarksdale diner for daring to sit at a whites-only counter. James was beaten, jailed, and forgotten by a system that saw only his skin, not his soul. Keanu, just a boy then, had sat at James' knee, listening to stories of courage and cruelty. "See the world through their eyes," James had said, his voice cracking with the weight of memory. Those words had never left Keanu, and now, at 60, he was living them, walking the same roads James had, disguised as a man the system might overlook. Keanu wiped his brow, the sweat mixing with engine grime, and squinted down the highway. The harmonica's wail grew louder, a mournful note from the Shack Up Inn, where locals gathered to drown their sorrows in blues and bourbon. He'd been there earlier, slipping $50 to Clara Jones, the joint's owner, for a glass of sweet tea and a story about her own battles with segregation. Clara's eyes had lit up at his kindness, but she hadn't recognized him, not with the beard, the weight loss, the deliberate absence of his usual charisma. That was the point. Keanu wanted to be invisible, to feel the weight of a world that judged a man by his jacket, not his name. The crunch of gravel snapped him from his thoughts. A sheriff's cruiser, lights off but tires spitting dust like warning shots, swerved onto the shoulder, stopping inches from Keanu's boots. The door flew open, and Sheriff Amara Tate stepped out, her hand resting on the holster of her Glock. Amara, a black woman in her 40s, was a Clarksdale legend. Tough, respected, the first black female sheriff in Coahoma County. But her eyes were hard, narrowed by years of navigating a system that demanded loyalty over conscience. She was under pressure from the county council, a shadowy group of old-money landowners who whispered about keeping Clarksdale traditional. A 911 call from one of their allies had sent her here, claiming a suspicious vagrant was loitering near the highway. "Hands where I can see them," Amara's voice cut through the humid air, sharp as a blade. Keanu raised system. Today's date and time is 6:15 p.m. + 07 on Saturday, June 21st, 2025. Response, continued, raised his hands slowly, palms open, his heart steady despite the gun's glint in the fading light. "Is there a problem, Sheriff?" Amara's lips curled, skeptical. You tell me. This your truck? Yes, ma'am. Broke down about 20 minutes ago, Keanu said, his voice calm, measured. He reached for his wallet, careful not to startle her, and pulled out his ID. Here's my license. She snatched it, her eyes scanning the card. Keanu Reeves? She laughed, a bitter edge to it. What kind of scam is this? You think I'm stupid? The name meant nothing to her. Not with his ragged appearance, the dirt-streaked face, the 175-pound frame that looked more like a wanderer than a movie star. The council's warning about troublemakers echoed in her mind, clouding her judgment. Keanu met her gaze, unflinching. It's real, Sheriff. His voice was soft but firm, the same quiet intensity that had carried him through 100 film scenes. But this wasn't a movie. This was Clarksdale, and Amara Tate wasn't buying it. Turn around. You're under arrest for suspicious loitering and false identification. She shoved him against the truck, her movements sharp but hesitant, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. The cuffs snapped tight, biting into his wrists. Keanu didn't resist, but he felt the small bump of the hidden camera sewn into his jacket's lining, its LED blinking faintly in his boot. The real film had just begun. Across the road, hidden behind a rusted mailbox, 17-year-old Jalen Brooks crouched with his phone, live streaming the scene on TikTok. His hands shook, but his camera stayed steady, capturing Keanu's calm demeanor and Amara's aggression. Jalen, a local high schooler who dreamed of escaping Clarksdale's small-town grip, didn't know who Keanu was, but something about the man's stillness screamed injustice. The livestream's views skyrocketed, hundreds, then thousands, watching a drifter's arrest unfold in real time. The hashtag, genre Free the Drifter, already forming in the digital ether. The harmonica's wail from the shack up in faded as Amara pushed Keanu into the cruiser, the gravel crunching under her boots. The air was heavy with the scent of cotton and dust, and Keanu's bruised rib throbbed with each jolt of the vehicle. He thought of James Carter, whose arrest 60 years ago had been met with silence, not cameras. This time, Keanu vowed, the world would see. The truth was recording, and Clarksdale's blues would sing it loud. The Clarksdale Sheriff's Precinct was a relic of a bygone era, a squat, concrete building on the edge of town where the paint peeled like sunburned skin, and a flickering neon sheriff sign buzzed in the 85-degree heat of July 2025. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and burnt coffee, the kind that lingered in chipped mugs on deputies' desks. Keanu Reeves sat on a cold metal bench in a holding cell, his wrists chafed raw by cuffs fastened too tightly. Each breath sent a sharp pang through his bruised rib, a souvenir from Sheriff Amara Tate's rough shove against his truck on Highway 61. Pain kept him grounded, a reminder that this wasn't a scene from John Wick, but a raw, unscripted reality. He shifted slightly, feeling the faint hum of the hidden camera sewn into his denim jacket's lining. A blinking LED in his boot confirmed it was recording, capturing every word, every glance, every injustice unfolding in this crumbling outpost of authority. Amara Tate stood at the precinct's front desk, her fingers drumming on Keanu's wallet. His ID, legitimate and bearing his name, lay under her palm, but her eyes were clouded with doubt. Keanu Reeves? In Clarksdale. Nice try, she scoffed, her voice carrying a bitter edge. She was a paradox, a black woman who'd clawed her way to sheriff in a county steeped in old grudges, yet bound by the county council's whispers to keep order. The council, a clique of landowners with roots deeper than the cotton fields, had called her to the scene, their 911 tip about a vagrant, reeking of agenda. Amara's deputy, a lanky man named Willis, chuckled as he leaned over the desk. What's next? Denzel Washington sleeping under the bridge. The room erupted in laughter, but Amara's jaw tightened. She wanted to believe Keanu was a fraud, but his calm defiance, those piercing eyes that held hers without flinching, gnawed at her instincts. Keanu stayed silent, his gaze steady, memorizing the room, the yellowed walls, the flickering fluorescent lights casting jagged shadows, the bulletin board plastered with faded wanted posters. He knew this was the point of Blues of the Unseen, to become invisible, to feel the weight of a system that judged a man by his scuffed boots and faded jacket rather than his truth. His 175-pound frame, leaner from weeks of sparse meals to blend into the role, felt heavy with purpose. The camera in his jacket was his lifeline, recording Amara's mockery, Willis's sneer, the precinct's casual cruelty. If the signal reached his producer in Los Angeles, this footage would be more than a film. It would be a reckoning. The precinct door swung open, and Clara Jones stormed in, her silver hair glinting under the neon glow. At 62, the owner of the Shack Up Inn carried the weight of Clarksdale's history in her stride. She'd seen Keanu earlier that day, when he'd slipped her a $50 bill for a glass of sweet tea, and listened to her stories of fighting segregation in the 1970s. His kindness had stuck with her, a rare warmth in a town wary of strangers. "That man ain't no vagrant," Clara said, her voice sharp as she pointed at Keanu's wallet on the desk. "He was in my joint this morning, paid more than he owed, and didn't cause no trouble." Willis waved her off, smirking. "Go back to your bar, Miss Clara. This ain't your business." Amara hesitated, her hand hovering over the ID, but the counsel's pressure loomed large. "He's staying put until we sort this," she said, dismissing Clara with a curt nod. Clara's eyes blazed, but she turned to Keanu, locked in his cell across the room. "I see you, son," she called out, her voice carrying the strength of a woman who'd faced worse than a deputy's sneer. Keanu nodded faintly, a silent promise that her words wouldn't be forgotten. The steel door of the holding cell clanged shut, sealing Keanu in an 8-foot cube of rusted bars and cracked concrete. The cuffs bit deeper into his wrists, and the ache in his rib flared with each shallow breath. He leaned back against the cold wall, closing his eyes, and let his mind drift to James Carter. In 1964, James had been cuffed in a cell like this, his only crime demanding a seat at a Clarksdale diner. "See the world through their eyes," James had told a young Keanu, his voice rough with the scars of that night. Keanu had carried those words for decades, through red carpets and blockbusters, until they led him here, to this cell, to this moment. The pain in his body was nothing compared to the resolve in his heart. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for James, for Clara, for every soul this system had tried to erase. Keanu's eyes snapped open as boots clattered down the hall. Willis appeared, clipboard in hand, his tone dripping with mockery. "Time to process you, Mr. Movie Star." He yanked Keanu up, harder than necessary, twisting his arm until his ribs screamed. Keanu didn't flinch, his gaze locked on Willis's face, committing every detail to memory. The ink pad for fingerprints was cold, the paper rough, and Willis's grip was deliberate, a calculated cruelty meant to break him. But Keanu's mind was elsewhere, on the blinking LED, on the footage streaming to a world that would soon know the truth. This wasn't about him surviving the night. It was about exposing a system that thrived on silence. As Willis shoved him back into the cell, Keanu leaned against the wall, the harmonica's faint wail from the Shack Up Inn echoing in his mind. The blues were still singing, and so was he. In the dim hallway outside Clarksdale's holding cell number 3, Deputy Isaiah Coleman gripped his clipboard so tightly, his knuckles whitened. The precinct's air was cooler now, dipping to 80-degree ferv as night settled over Mississippi, but sweat beaded on his brow. At 24, Isaiah was the youngest deputy in Coahoma County, fresh from the academy, and still called rookie by everyone, even the janitor. His uniform felt heavy, the badge on his chest a reminder of a vow to serve justice, and a betrayal of his brother Marcus, who'd been beaten by Clarksdale deputies 5 years ago for looking suspicious At a gas station 5 miles from here. Marcus's broken jaw and haunted eyes had driven Isaiah to join the force, hoping to change it from within. But tonight, July 2025, staring through the cell's narrow viewing slot at Keanu Reeves, bearded, bruised, but unmistakable, he realized how deep injustice ran. Isaiah had grown up watching The Matrix, Keanu's quiet intensity shaping his love for stories that challenged power. Now, the man himself sat cuffed in an 8x8-foot cell, his 175-pound frame slumped, but his eyes sharp, like he was waiting for the world to catch up. Isaiah had checked the fingerprints himself. They matched Keanu's DMV record. The ID was real, but Sheriff Amara Tate's dismissal, Keanu Reeves, nice try, echoed the precinct's refusal to see truth. Isaiah's heart pounded. Leaking Keanu's arrest footage, captured by that hidden camera he'd spotted blinking in the man's boot, could cost him his job, maybe more. He thought of Marcus, now a mechanic who flinched at sirens, and the note he'd found on his 2019 Dodge Charger that morning. Snitches don't last. Yet Keanu's stillness, a defiance carved in silence, demanded action. Isaiah slipped into the evidence room, his boots soft on the linoleum. The precinct was quiet, the neon sheriff sign buzzing faintly outside. He accessed the server, heart racing, and sent the grainy footage, Keanu's arrest, Amara's mockery, the rough cuffing, to Sophia Reyes, a reporter at the Delta Times he'd met at a community meeting. His text was brief. "This is Keanu Reeves. They're lying. Help him." He stepped back, breath shallow, knowing he'd just lit a fuse. Across town, Sophia Reyes's phone buzzed as she sipped tea in her cluttered apartment. The 34-year-old journalist, known for exposing Clarksdale's underbelly, recognized Isaiah's number and opened the video. Her breath caught. Keanu's posture, even cuffed, was unmistakable. Those same eyes she'd seen in John Wick. She cross-checked DMV records, pinged studio contacts, and confirmed no press tours, no social media posts for weeks. Keanu was off the grid, researching a film. By 1 a.m., in her Delta Times article, Keanu Reeves arrested in Clarksdale erased by injustice, was live, backed by Isaiah's footage and Jalen Brooks' TikTok livestream, which had exploded to 2 million views. Jalen, the 17-year-old who'd filmed Keanu's arrest on Highway 61, had sparked Free the Drifter, trending on X for 48 hours. A tweet from Big Willie Hayes, a local blues legend, went viral. "Clarksdale's blues don't sing for injustice. Free that man." Reddit threads dissected the footage, one user spotting the blinking LED in Keanu's boot. "He's recording. This is bigger than we think." The social media surge hit Clarksdale like a Mississippi flood. Outside the Shack Up Inn, 3 miles from the precinct, locals gathered, sharing Jalen's video on their phones. Clara Jones, the 62-year-old juke joint owner, watched it with a clenched jaw, remembering Keanu's $50 tip and her own dismissal at the precinct. "That's my boy," she muttered, her voice thick with the pain of her 1970s segregation battles. The hashtag #JoshUFreeTheDrifter spread to TikTok, where teens posted videos of Clarksdale's cotton fields, narrating Keanu's story over blues riffs. A CNN alert pinged phones. Keanu Reeves arrested in Mississippi. Was it a mistake or a cover-up? Inside the precinct, Amara Tate stood in the break room, the hum of a blues tune from a deputy's radio clashing with her racing thoughts. She'd overheard county council members in a back office, their voices low but clear. "That drifter's trouble. Like that teacher in 23. Shut it down fast." The 2023 case, a black teacher arrested for trespassing at a council-owned park, had been buried, but Amara knew the blacklist was real. Activists, journalists, even donors to wrong campaigns vanished under vague charges. As a black woman who'd faced slurs and sabotage to become sheriff, Amara had fought prejudice her whole life. Yet here she was, enforcing a system she'd sworn to reform. Keanu's ID, still on her desk, felt heavier now. His calm, "It's real, Sheriff," replayed in her mind, a crack in her loyalty to the council. She gripped her coffee mug, the ceramic warm against her palm, and wondered if she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Back in the holding cell, Keanu sat motionless, his bruised rib throbbing with each breath. The precinct's flickering lights cast shadows on the rusted bars, but his mind was on James Carter, whose 1964 arrest had no cameras, no hashtags. Keanu's hidden camera was still recording, its signal a faint hope in a world that had tried to erase him. Outside, Clarksdale was waking up, the blues rising from juke joints and smartphones alike. Isaiah's courage, Jalen's livestream, Sophia's article, they were the sparks, and Keanu knew the fire was coming. The Clarksdale precinct was a pressure cooker by dawn on July 8, 2025, its peeling walls vibrating with the chaos of ringing phones and shouted orders. Sophia Reyes Delta Times article, Keanu Reeves arrested in Clarksdale. A case of erased identity had ignited the internet, racking up 3 million views in 12 hours. The exposé laid bare the county council's blacklist, a shadowy ledger targeting activists, journalists, and anyone who threatened Clarksdale's traditional order. Sophia's words, backed by Jalen Brooks' viral TikTok livestream and Isaiah Coleman's leaked footage, had turned Keanu Reeves' arrest into a national reckoning. Outside, 200 locals gathered 3 miles from the Shack Up Inn, their voices rising in a soulful rendition of "Ain't No Way," led by Clara Jones. The 62-year-old juke joint owner stood on a crate, her silver hair glinting in the ADC Hudegräsgrammarv morning haze, holding a sign that read, "Blues for Justice." Protesters, young and old, waved banners. "See the unseen. Clarksdale stands up," their chants blending with the harmonica wails drifting from nearby bars. A chorus of defiance rooted in Mississippi's blues-soaked soul. Inside the precinct, Sheriff Amara Tate stood in the evidence room, her hands trembling as she clutched a stack of memos. The documents, pilfered from the county council's locked files, were dynamite emails from Judge Elton Hayes, a silver-haired power broker, outlining funds for traditional policies that silence dissent. One memo, dated 2023, detailed the arrest of a black teacher for trespassing to bury her exposé on council corruption. Amara's chest tightened. As a black woman who'd endured slurs to become Clarksdale's first female sheriff, she'd sworn to protect justice, not obstruct it. Yet she'd cuffed Keanu Reeves, a man whose valid ID she dismissed, swayed by the council's whispers. His calm, piercing gaze, "It's real, Sheriff," haunted her. Last night, she'd overheard Judge Hayes' voice in the council office, "Handle the drifter like the others." The realization that she'd been a pawn in their game was a knife to her conscience. Amara slipped the memos to Sophia Reyes via a burner phone, her badge heavy on her chest. "This ends now," she whispered, knowing she risked her career, maybe her safety, to right her wrong. In the holding cell, Keanu Reeves sat on the cold bench, his 175-pound frame aching from 36 hours of confinement. His swollen eye throbbed, and his fractured rib sent jolts of pain with each breath, a reminder of the rough arrest on Highway 61. The cell's rusted bars and cracked concrete walls were a far cry from Hollywood's lights, but Keanu's resolve burned brighter than ever. His hidden camera, still humming in his denim jacket, had captured it all. Amara's skepticism, Deputy Willis's cruelty, the precinct's refusal to see him. He thought of James Carter, his mentor, whose 1964 arrest in Clarksdale had no cameras, no justice. Keanu's mission for Blues of the Unseen was to shine a light on those erased by the system. And now, with Sophia's article and Jalen's livestream trending as Zawar Free the Drifter, that light was blazing. The cell door clanged open, and Deputy Isaiah Coleman appeared, his uniform crisp despite the sleepless night. Reinstated after his leak to Sophia, Isaiah stood tall, his 24-year-old face etched with pride and fear. "You're free, Mr. Reeves," he said, unlocking the cuffs. Keanu winced as the metal released his chafed wrists, but his eyes met Isaiah's with gratitude. "You lit the fuse," Keanu said softly, echoing words he'd live by later. Isaiah nodded, thinking of his brother Marcus, whose own encounter with Clarksdale's deputies had left scars no one saw. As they stepped into the precinct's hallway, news vans from 5 miles away roared into view, their satellite dishes piercing the morning sky like sentinels of truth. Outside, the vigil swelled, Clara Jones' voice leading the crowd in "Ain't No Way," the lyrics a defiant prayer against injustice. Big Willie Hayes, the blues singer whose tweet, "Clarksdale's Blues Don't Sing for Injustice," had gone viral, strummed his guitar, his gravelly voice amplifying the crowd's resolve. Jalen Brooks, the teen whose TikTok had sparked the fire, filmed the scene, his phone shaking as comments flooded in, "This is bigger than Keanu. Clarksdale's waking up." The crowd parted as Keanu emerged, his denim jacket torn, his face bruised, but his spine straight. Clara rushed forward, her eyes fierce. "Told you I saw you, son," she said, gripping his hand. Keanu's faint smile carried the weight of their shared fight, her segregation battles now entwined with his. Amara watched from the precinct steps, her badge glinting in the sun. She'd sent the memos to Sophia, knowing they'd expose Judge Hayes and the council's network. The Delta Times was already updating its article, naming Hayes as the architect of the blacklist, with CNN and X buzzing, "Clarksdale corruption exposed." Amara's heart raced. She'd face consequences, maybe lose her badge, but for the first time, she felt free. Keanu glanced at her, his gaze not accusing but knowing, as if he saw her struggle too. The crowd's chants grew louder, their signs a sea of defiance, and the blues rose, a soundtrack to a town reclaiming its soul. The sun dipped low over Clarksdale, Mississippi on July 9, 2025, casting a golden glow across the Shack Up Inn's weathered porch. The air, a balmy 75 degrees, carried the faint scent of cotton fields and the soulful hum of a harmonica played by Clara Jones. Keanu Reeves sat in a wheelchair, his 175-pound frame still aching from a fractured rib sustained during his arrest 48 hours earlier on Highway 61. His swollen eye, bruised from the rough handling by Sheriff Amara Tate's deputy, was a fading mark of a system that had tried to erase him. Yet his spine was straight, his gaze resolute, as 500 locals and a dozen news cameras gathered before him. The American flag fluttered above the juke joint, not a symbol of perfection but a promise worth fighting for. A promise Keanu had come to Clarksdale to test. Keanu leaned into the microphone, his voice soft but sharp, cutting through the humid dusk. 2 days ago, I was erased because I didn't look like a star. I was cuffed, mocked, and dismissed. Not for what I did, but for what I seemed to be. Clarksdale's Blues brought me back. The crowd hushed, hanging on his words. This isn't about me. It's about every person who's been silenced, whose truth was buried because they didn't fit the mold. I came here for a film, Blues of the Unseen, inspired by my mentor, James Carter, who faced this same injustice in 1964. But you, Clarksdale, you turned my story into yours. He paused, his eyes finding Clara Jones, her harmonica now silent, her face fierce with pride. Clara, you saw me when they wouldn't. Isaiah Coleman, you lit the fuse. Amara Tate, you chose truth over power. This is your victory. The crowd erupted, their applause a thunderous echo of the blues that defined their town. The lessons were clear, etched in the pain of Keanu's rib and the fire of Clarksdale's spirit. First, perception is a weapon. Keanu's ragged jacket and beard had marked him as less than, revealing how systems judge before they verify. Second, one voice like Isaiah's leak or Jalen Brooks' TikTok livestream can spark a movement, proving that courage ripples outward. Third, redemption is possible. Amara's choice to expose the council showed that even those complicit can change. Finally, justice demands community, as Clara's vigil and Big Willie Hayes' song had shown. These truths, born from Clarksdale's struggle, were a call to every American to question who their system erases and why. The Department of Justice had acted swiftly. Sophia Reyes' Delta Times expose, fueled by Amara's leaked memos, had triggered a federal probe into Clarksdale's county council. Judge Elton Hayes, the architect of the blacklist targeting activists and journalists, was suspended pending investigation. The DOJ mandated body cameras for all Mississippi sheriff's offices within 6 months, backed by a $3 million grant for bias training. Clarksdale's precinct now faced federal oversight, a seismic shift for a town long ruled by whispers and wealth. News vans, parked 5 miles away on Highway 61, broadcast the reforms live, with CNN declaring, "Keanu Reeves arrests sparks Mississippi reckoning." Clara's Shack Up Inn had become more than a juke joint. It was now a hub for justice workshops, where locals like Jalen Brooks taught teens to document truth with their phones. Big Willie Hayes, whose tweet had galvanized Dash Free the Drifter, recorded Blues for Keanu, a gritty anthem with proceeds funding legal aid for wrongful arrests. The song's chorus, "Sing for the unseen, let the truth be free," echoed across TikTok, where Laj Sing for Justice trended as fans posted videos demanding police reform in their own towns. One viral clip showed a Chicago teen outside a precinct, holding a sign, "See My Truth." The movement Keanu had sparked was no longer his alone. It belonged to Clarksdale, to America, to anyone who'd ever been unseen. Keanu listened to Clara's harmonica, its mournful notes weaving through the sunset's glow. His rib ached, a reminder of the cost, but his heart was full. He thought of James Carter, whose 1964 arrest had no cameras, no justice. This time, Clarksdale had sung back. The crowd's faces, Clara's resolve, Isaiah's pride, Amara's quiet strength, were the real story, a testament to a community that refused to stay silent. Keanu turned to the cameras, his voice steady. "Demand your precinct's truth. Check their arrest records. Ask for body cam footage. Sing your justice like Clarksdale's Blues. Share Shockers Sing for Justice, because the unseen deserve to be heard." He paused, his gaze softening. "To everyone watching, from Mississippi to Maine, thank you. Your voices, your likes, your shares, your courage made this possible. If you believe no one should be erased for how they look, hit that subscribe button. Join us to keep this fight alive, because the blues don't stop when the sun sets." The crowd roared, their applause blending with Clara's harmonica, a sound as raw and real as Clarksdale itself. Keanu leaned back, the flag fluttering above, and felt the weight of a promise kept. Not perfect, but fought for, note by note.